It says we're live. Hello and welcome to the Level With Us Livecast. I am your host, Marco DeSantos, also known as Mechanic Critic. And with me is the ever amazing, ever wonderful Project Manager extraordinaire himself. The one, the only.
Josh, also known as E3. How's it going, guys?
Hey, so as you might have all noticed, with me again this week is Josh, the wonderful man who manages the projects, the project manager wrangler, instead of Brad. We want to make a few announcements first before we go with the rest of the live cast and with our proposed slash topic. For this week, we're going to be announcing that the live cast is going to take on a different shape and form. It's not going to be like, a revamp or whatever, but we are changing our schedule and we are changing our host. Josh will now be taking Brad's place for a large majority of these podcasts or live casts because Brad has a toddler. I think that's all the reason you need, right? Brad has a toddler that he has to take care of, and it means that he can't do the live cast during the times that we've set, and we've agreed that changing the time of the live cast wasn't exactly the most viable thing because the only time Brad would be able to do the live cast would be during work hours. And I don't think everybody wants to tune into a podcast only during work hours. I guess given the current world situation, that might be a decent-ish idea, but it's not necessarily the best. Number two, we are gonna be going to a bi-weekly format, and note this doesn't mean twice a week. We're doing the podcast slash livecast once every 2 weeks from now on. There's a lot of reasons that went into this decision, mostly that we realized that we're basically lacking content a lot of the time. What we're doing on the live cast is just chatting and not really talking about important stuff or stuff that people are interested in. Or, we're just playing Mega Man for the 7th week in a row, right? Like, there's nothing... Fortnightly, that works. But if you really think about it, there's millions of games of Fortnite being played every day. So I don't think we can sustain every fortnight. Regardless, though, we are moving to a fortnightly, bi-weekly, once every 2 weeks format. That way we can keep the quality of the content high for all of you. And, Josh technically does this in his off time. I technically have to wake up at like 4 a.m. to do this stuff. So, it kind of eases up on our schedules too. So hopefully all of you understand. It will still give us more time to prepare as well, so the content will hopefully be more intriguing to you and hopefully be more of value to you. So there you go. Those are our announcements for today. Let's move on to the important topic for this week, which is a bullet design talk. So Josh, can you give us a little view as to why we've chosen this topic?
It's bullets still relevant, even though it's been off the press, and we wanted to talk about things we've learned moving forward. Right, as we've gone to press, we've realized some design things that we want to, some things we want to avoid, some things we want to try to do more in the future for this game. So I figured it'd be an interesting topic to talk about. All the other games we're working on, right? Project-wise, are kind of there's not too much to say. The wheels are turning, but there's nothing really exciting to talk about. So,
right.
With Bullet,
you want this entire live cast to just be me and Josh going, yes, this project is on a boat and ready to ship. This project is not on a boat. It's not very interesting.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I think one really important thing to note is that if the thumbnail for this video hasn't already exposed that fact, it's the fact that there's more Bullet coming. So it's also fresh in our minds because as we're doing more Bullet, we're starting to realize essentially where we've quote unquote gone wrong with Bullet Heart. Not to say that Bullet Heart's a bad game or whatever, but there's just certain things that you learn as you make more of a game, right? Like as we learned more and more about BattleCon, like the design philosophy behind each set of Battlecon changed, right? Like
anyone that's played Exceed Season 1, knows that it wasn't the best showing of Exceed we've done. It's the first outing, so to speak.
And anyone who's played Battlecon knows that Battlecon's complexity curve went from like, and then in Trials we're like, wait a minute, that just tends to be how it goes. So let's talk a little bit about Bullet. Let's talk a little bit about essentially the lessons learned. But before we talk about the lessons learned, let's talk about the things that we think are good, like things that we should keep doing from regular Bullet Heart, right?
Right.
I want to say hi to chat. So sorry, John Mays, It Came from the Mist, Aaron Lear. Hopefully, I pronounced your name correctly. Looking forward to Bullet, says John. My computer is so trash that I can't play it on TTS. That's unfortunate, but hopefully you can keep playing the game. Again, as usual, Filipino internet. I might be dropping some frames here and there, but that's fine so long as you can still hear me. We're still in the clear. So Josh, what are the things that we should keep doing that we did in Bullet Heart?
I mean, so Bullet's a pretty casual free game, right? Kind of like Millennium. It's that you can do whatever. So I think there's a lot more concrete answers to what we shouldn't do in the future. I think what we should do in the future is just, get crazier, right? The system of Bullet can support a lot of stuff that we haven't gotten to delve into yet. So I think just doing more new things to kind of push the limits of the system and see the design space ends is kind of the future of the game, right? Every game of Bullet you'll get is going to be more heroines and more bosses and whatnot. So it's kind of just seeing what can we do every new game to get even crazier with it.
Right. We seem to be dropping a lot of frames. I apologize. Let me just turn off some things, I guess. Alright. Okay, I think I gotta turn off Adobe Cloud. Come on, world, work with me. Okay, I'm gonna turn off Adobe Cloud.
Try to think of other things that, maybe things that are concrete that we want to do more in the future with the game. I think the base game Heart, it's really told us what kind of what is sacred with the game, what can't be touched, and what can be things like power-ups, for example. We designed a pretty solid set of 10-ish power-ups, and there's not really of design space there to work with, especially since it's only used in some of them, so not all. So I think power-ups is something that we probably won't do more future. It's not like every set of Bullet will come with a new power-ups or anything. As far as sacredness in the game, from what we've done design for some future things for Bullet, and sites are kind of the only that's sacred game.
No,
the only
wrong.
Thing that you
not just sites, right?
Those are not just sites, right?
Bags too. We've learned that bags are very sacred.
No matter what a heroine does, you still have to play the game of Bullet somehow.
Right.
You have to put bullets in bags. Honestly, even bags aren't sacred. You could get rid of bags. You can't get rid of currents, but you could get rid of the bags.
Right.
That represent
but, stuff like putting things putting unique components into bags. That's kind of the realm where we kind of drew the line, right?
Yeah, doing stuff like that. There's a couple lines that you can't really cross. You can't mess with the contents of the bullet bag too much. You can't put new bullets in or take them out or anything without getting too shady, I would say.
Yep. Also, bullets are kind of sacred, right?
We have not designed a hair yet that has a U line that says you don't do anything with bullets.
Or we haven't designed a heroine, or don't plan to create a heroine whose design is you have custom bullets.
Right, the game is called Bullets, so they got to be there somewhere, right?
Right.
You can't get rid of them entirely. You might be able to like you play with them differently than other ones. Like your sight's a weird shape, or like your sight's a completely different thing that you play a different game but using the same bullets.
Right.
Maybe, but you still have to get bullets. You have to do something with them, and you have to send them to the opponent.
Right. It's kind of weird that we realize that kind of stuff. But Bullet does a few good things really well, right? Some things I want to point out, and some really concrete things are, one thing I didn't realize about Bullet Heart that would end up kind of permeating into future design would be just how powerful actions are at creating a character's identity. Does that make sense? So, for example, you'd think in a game like this that the thing that would create the identity of a character would be their unique ability, or their unique ability, the thing that says unique ability that makes them unique. But a lot of the time, things that people tend to remember are things that we never expected. So, like, when you say Adelheid and you say what makes Adelheid good, people don't go, oh, it's because she can flip bullets and have wild bullets and blah blah blah. People go like, oh, it's because she has diagonal movement, right? Actions can kind of really dictate how iconic a certain thing of a character is. Actions are very iconic to every single character, and I think that's a design
your set of actions is just as much of a UA as your UA is.
Right.
So, you have heroines, that are more designed their actions. They have a U, and their actions naturally follow from it. But there's like Adelheid too, where her actions are kind of disjointed from her UA. They're things that are nice, that like anyone would like to have, but Adelheid in particular likes to have for what she does.
Yeah, because her patterns are a bit hard to accomplish. And I think stuff like that is what we should keep doing. And stuff like that is something that you wouldn't expect necessarily, right? Like, because in a simple game like this, usually what dictates the entire identity of one of the variable powers is the variable power itself. And realizing the strength of how iconic actions can be has led us to some interesting designs down the line that I'm not sure if we can talk about. But we
could probably talk, as long as we don't name drop, we talk about mechanics. We can tease mechanics to some extent.
So for example, it's like, given that we know that actions can be very iconic to a character, who's to say that you need a UA anymore, right? To make that character memorable or interesting or fun.
Yeah, everything that's not sacred is kind of up for debate. Right? You could have a character, no UA, character with no action board at all. As long as the actions go somewhere, like as long as the character still has agency, you as a player can do something. The actions don't have to be on the action board. They could be like your sight, or your patterns, or your UA maybe, You can do all kinds of nutso stuff.
Yeah, and I think exploring the design space is very important. But you know what design space we shouldn't explore? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we're getting into the don'ts list.
We're getting into the don'ts list. There's like you said, there's definitely a lot of don'ts compared to the amount of do's that we have.
Yeah.
So, candidate number 1 uses her marker to clear stuff from the board. It's the one, the only, Mariel. We should never just make Mariel again.
Kind of just using a marker in general. We found that characters like Mariel and Senka, while they're like really fun and interesting, they're kind of a pain to design. And characters that generate markers kind of like require a lot of rules. Their UAs are really pretty. They cause us to have to think about like a lot of additional things, because they create this unique component that interacts with the board, which interacts with the rules, and it kind of just blossoms into this like web of real annoying stuff that I have to check.
Right.
How does the marker interact with this? What if a heroine would do this? Sure, does the marker cause problems with that? So
what happens if the marker gets cleared? Can the marker be cleared? What happens if the marker's on top of a bullet? I need to check for the viability and color of a pattern. It's like...
Right. So markers in sight specifically are really scary. I don't think that... That's not to say we won't do marker characters ever again, but if we did a marker character in the future, they would be more like... Their markers would be elsewhere. right? They would be on their UA or their board, and if they were on their site, again, they'd have to be really, really clean and interesting too. You'd have to have a really, really good reason to do a character Mariel or Senka again, I think.
Right.
They'd have to be really flavorful. Like the UA would have to be really simple and grokkable and whatnot.
Right. And even then, right?
So don't be surprised if the next expansion doesn't have markers in it.
Let's talk about what you just said, right? And I think this is a really important design concept that a lot of people who are designing their games should probably understand. And it's the juice versus the squeeze dichotomy that I always talk about whenever people make custom characters. And what you just talked about right now, it's like, we're not gonna make a marker character unless, and then here's a bunch of conditions, right? Basically, certain mechanics and certain things in your game and certain design spaces can be done. But given that games need to be finished, games need to be tested, and games need to be shipped as products that you need to sell, there's a certain amount of, there's a maximum limit to how much work you can shove into a game, right? And
how much overhead does making this character do for us?
Right. And there's a certain amount of time that we can allot to each character. And the moment one character needs to take up 17 billion hours or something, I don't think there needs to be a certain amount of payoff for that, right? Because if at the end of the day, you could say hey, let's put what's a terrible example? Let's put a heroine that makes markers and stuff onto the board, blah 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 blah. If that same heroine could be modeled via, she just has cards, or she just has an action that's cool, or whatever, 9 times out of 10, most people wouldn't care whether or not the character had markers or not, right?
Right. There's a lot of other ways to do a flavor thing without doing the most obtuse, complicated, hard to implement method, right?
No, but that's the thing. The hard, obtuse, complicated thing is more oftentimes the quote-unquote intuitive thing, right? And that tends to be the trap that we and a lot of people fall into. So, for example, when you get let's get a heroine that summons things, right? That's their gimmick, right? They summon things. The first thing that pops into your mind is, let's create extra components, because that's what summoning things is, right?
Yeah, where you gotta summon them somewhere, so it's gotta be your site, right?
It's gotta be a marker, right? It's and that's kind of the thing, right? It creates this.
That's kind of one of those check marks, right? It's does it have to be a marker? Can you represent summoning in some way while still keeping that integrity, right? And if the answer to all of those other is no, then maybe you can consider markers somehow.
Right.
Eventually.
It's one of those things, definitely, that it has to be really, really worth it. And 9 times out of 10 it is not. Now that we're talking about it in retrospect, we could have probably done Senka and Mariel in different ways.
Senka, I think, is more okay as a marker character than Mariel. I would have rather just redesigned as a dry erase board character or something.
Dry erase board seems interesting.
Yeah. Dry erase board's one of those really easy mechanics that I kind of have in my back pocket for eventually. That the game could technically do it right now. The boards are the same as the Millennium boards. You can write on it and erase it. It's laminated.
Right. You need a white marker, but regardless, that will work.
Yeah. We want it to be a little tame. The base set is pretty tame. We didn't get too crazy base game and scare people off.
Right. That's why Youngja's the only
Youngja's the only zany character.
If we're being real, Youngja's the only hard character, right? Youngja's the only character that quote unquote.
She's the only character whose mechanics get really wait, what does she do again?
Yeah, she doesn't play Bullet anymore. Is the point, right? She barely.
She plays a very different game.
She barely plays Bullet, right?
But in future stuff, we can get a little more. We could have created another Youngja type base set. I think it's just that we happen to fall into the ones that were done, were the simpler ones, and we wanted to present the simpler ones to the people first.
Right.
I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if everyone was Youngja, everyone would be going, what kind of game is this?
What kind of
right?
Yeah. You need to.
What are we even doing?
You need to establish what the lines are before you start breaking the lines, right? And having half the game be just heroines that are oh, it's Yahtzee now, like, or oh, it's Snake and Ladders, like,
Yeah, or it's Battleship or chess or whatever. Yeah.
the people are like, what the heck's going on? So,
Mhm.
so that's one. I think another design lesson that we learned is Youngja herself. Not to say that we should never make a character like
Yeah.
Youngja ever again, but one design that we've realized is that a character's UA slash playstyle should be synonymous to one another. So what does that mean, right? A character's abilities, actions, or whatever, the things that are printed on their board, should explicitly tell you how to play that character. One big problem that we've encountered since we've got Bullet released and spread to the masses is that a lot of people end up
Well, it's
playing.
not out yet. But
Well, it's on
on
TTS.
TTS.
It's on TTS though.
right. Yeah.
One thing we've realized is that people end up playing Youngja and then basically go, this character's terrible. Or this
Yeah, we've
character
heard a
is-
lot of reviews and comments like, I'm playing Yoonja like you would play every heroine, and she's terrible.
Right.
And
Then-
that's
then-
partially because her UA doesn't tell you how to play, right?
Right.
You're actually just supposed to pattern spam, but nowhere on board really says, "Hey, guy, you're supposed to pattern spam." Or
Right.
Um, she has some pattern actions and stuff, but that's not explicit enough.
Right. It should be something like, her draw pattern is just cheaper.
She,
right?
or her UA should just say, like, when she plays a pattern, she gets a new pattern.
Or something like
something.
that. Right.
Yeah, something to make it a little more obvious.
It's really interesting because, like you said, like people say that they play Youngja like every heroine, and I really like it. Well, like, quote and unquote, is whenever people try to analyze Bullet and try to prove that Youngja's bad by going like, every other heroine can clear 2 to 3 bullets with each of their patterns, but Youngja can only clear 1 with 7 out of her 10
1
patterns.
2, yeah.
Like we know. I think that's a really interesting point. I'm not making fun of these people, right? But like, it just goes to show that when you create a character like this, you should be signaling to your players that, this is how the character plays. And like you said, it's probably something along the lines of like, Youngja needed to have like either a pattern refill, just something on her UA or on her board that says play more patterns, and something like that. So definitely when we create more weird heroines, we should definitely make it so that their UA or their actions signal to you how to actually play that character.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. John Mays says that Senka is their favorite character. Late, but they're cooking while they listen. Hey, look, that's completely fine. If you feel free to just listen to us in the background as we talk about and rant about designs.
Yeah, Senka's great. Like, she was, despite all this like talk, Senka and Meryl aren't great because they're cool, and I'm glad that they exist.
Right.
Partially teach us lessons, but partially it's like they're still fine. Senka work and they're good and whatever.
Right.
They just took a little more elbow grease to get to press than other characters.
And I think
it was a bit of a hassle.
I think that's the important thing to point out here. It's not that we're saying that marker characters can't be done in Bullet. It's just that marker characters take a considerable more amount of time.
Just have to be careful,
right,
in the future.
And the point is that it's time that we usually don't have. Does that make sense? Right.
Also, just there's so much other design space that I want to explore. Right.
Right.
There's so much this game can do. It's insane.
Yeah, it's very similar to me and how I feel about Exceed and BattleCon, especially when people make custom characters that have UAs that blossom into a bunch of like crazy stuff. And I think to myself, It's like, there's a lot of design space that is so simple and unexplored in BattleCon and Exceed that it's kind of odd for me that the first thing people always gravitate towards is to create the most complicated thing ever. Not to say that that's bad, not to say that you can't make a good character out of that, but like, there's a certain beauty and elegance that I enjoy, and that's really it, right? There's a certain beauty and elegance, and there's also like the juice worth the squeeze analogy is like, why are you working so hard to do this weird, complicated thing when you could have just done X and like done it in half the amount of time?
Well, I think it's the kind of thing that a lot of people just don't like think to do. Right? When they think of a concept, they just latch on to it and don't think like, maybe I should think of 10 ways to make this kind of mechanic first, and then pick the one that is clean or makes the most sense. They just go, if I'm gonna make Tinker Knight, we got to make a really big dude, right? Yeah. So, which is fine, Tinker Knight's cool and fun.
Right, but there are other ways to.
I think that if I had designed Tinker Knight, I would done his, big dumb robot, not in a 3-card spread, or maybe like a 5-card spread, or like there's many ways to represent being big, right?
Yeah, you could literally just make the board bigger. Smaller. You could make it so that the opponent can't move past you once you're exceeded, right? Like,
oh my gosh, I didn't even think about making the board smaller. Yeah, that's actually pretty cool.
Right. I mean that's kind of the thing that ends up like being a very important point that I want to point out, is that a lot of design, and we're guilty of this too. I'm not saying that this is just the people who make custom characters or whatever. We're guilty of this too. Oh
yeah, you should see some of the tests that on like character UAs and stuff that got scrapped early on.
No, but that's my point. That's my point. Heads. The fact that we scrap them means we're not falling into that trap now, right? So
trying to. Yeah.
Right. One thing I want to point out here is when you said like, people latch on to an initial design. And I think that's a big problem, because some people, sometimes we, create a design, and then we go, oh, like this design doesn't work because it's too broken or whatever. And instead of just scrapping the design entirely, what we do is we compile more and more mechanics on top of it to hopefully balance / fix the problems, right? Like this is the same thing with marker characters, right? It's like, okay, Mariel's on the board, she's clearing stuff. It's like, oh, but she's a bullet so that you can hop over her. Oh, wait, now that she's a bullet, she can be cleared. So what do we do with that? Do we just say she can't be cleared? Do we say that she teleports somewhere? Okay, now that she teleports somewhere, crap. When does she teleport in? How does she teleport back? Where can she teleport? It's like we just kept compiling things. When in reality, we should have just scrapped the marker entirely and just done
Mariel is really scary how many changes she got last second. And like her clear teleport on herself was added like right before the press, because one of us, I forget who, woke up and went, oh crap, she can't, like, there are situations in which she could be cleared, and if she can't be cleared, and she cause these problems, and we do something that's cleaner like right now before we send it to press.
Right, we wake up in the dead of the night and we go,
right.
That's us.
And the whole getting attached thing too, when we did the closing live stream for the Kickstarter, one of the things I mentioned is that I learned that when to let go during design, but like, newsflash, I still haven't really learned completely how to we did a test the other day, yesterday, in fact, for a bullet thing. And we had this character who part of her gimmick was that she could turn into her boss mode mid-game.
Yeah, so
like she had an action that switched to her boss mode UA. And I was so adamant about this character has to do this. This is her thing. We have to make it work. And we tried making it work for 3 weeks. And then yesterday it was, very apparent that this isn't going to work. Or if it is going to work, we don't have time to be, think this for another 4th week, right? We just got to detach it. And, the character's still perfectly fine without going into a boss mode, right? They're still the character. And they still do the character things, and they still have a UA, and all that.
I think for this character, one thing that's very important to point out is that it's not balancing a heroine whose boss mode works in single player is an obtuse thing.
Right, because you in heroine mode means you the player, but you in boss mode means you the players that are fighting boss, right? So you have to the challenge is to design a that works both ways, right? That works negatively against the players when they're fighting the boss version, but works positively for you if you switch to it.
Right. But even outside of that design challenge, right? It's also another design challenge of readability and understandability, right?
Right.
Because what happens when you can become boss in the middle of a single player game is that the same line of text technically is an entirely different effect based on
right. If you don't know how boss mode works and you just go into boss mode with this character, you might think it works differently than it actually does.
Because the intuitive thing
a little confusing
that a lot of people seem to understand is that, like either way it just becomes really confusing. And Josh and I realized, oh man, this is really cool, but it's not worth, the juice ain't worth the squeeze, right?
Yeah, it's not worth the time we would have to put in to make it work. And we could tell after 2 or 3 weeks that, like, it might not even work, period.
Right.
Right. At least with this kind of a design, except for their UA at least.
Right.
So we pulled back, and they just don't turn into their boss mode anymore, and that's fine.
Right.
They're still interesting. They still have a cool design.
Yeah,
and
they do.
So
I think that's one thing that's really important too. Is, so I always make a point. So yesterday, actually, I don't know if you saw the conversation, but yesterday we were actually talking in the BattleCon Discord. God, but I keep talking about BattleCon. But we were talking about the BattleCon Discord about...
It's your game.
It's my game, I guess. Because we were talking to BattleCon Discord about the streamlining of version 4 of BattleCon, right? And how a lot of the effects that were, I'll put it in heavy quotation marks, cool, are gone, right? Sagas can't copy cards anymore. Characters that calculated their range from weird places just have, actual ranged modifiers that are similar to those weird range calculations. Characters that, say, this attack hits at range 1 and 3. We're just going like, nah, it just hits 1 to 3. Like, I don't understand why we gave that a 2 blind spot, right? Stuff like that is I think the bad game design goblin talking to us and like telling us, yes, it's cool. And I think a lot of bad game design goes through because people think it's cool. And there's nothing wrong with making cool things. But
yeah, and not that it's not cool necessarily. It's just like, is the coolness worth the hassle, right? Worth all the rules, FQs, and the interactions and that are going to come up.
And if any of you have played Caitlyn, Gaspar, freaking Sagas, you all know it's not. It's not worth the thing. Now, what's a good example of a thing that's cool in BattleCon that's completely worth the squeeze, because there's no squeeze? For example, having attacks that have 999 damage, or a finisher with range 59 and power 60, right? Like, that's kind of stuff is cool, but, like, it
doesn't cause problems, right?
Right. And in Bullet, it's very much the same way, like when we have that boss switching heroine, it's like, that's cool, but it's not a reason to waste all of our time. Like, know.
Well, it's kind of the curse of being the designer, right? It's something I always wonder when people get not like upset, but go like, man, I liked old Gaspar or old Kate. If we had presented with version 4 Kate Gaspar in the first place, you wouldn't even know that the other 3 versions exist, right? But as designers, we know all the versions that never happened. And, I get bummed sometimes going, man, we still don't have a character that turns into a boss yet.
Right. Actually, John Mays is asking, do y'all scrap ideas like that, the boss switching character, or do y'all set it aside and see if it could be implemented differently down the line?
Whenever possible, it's always back to the drawing thing, right? When I design, I never go like, we're never doing this ever again,
Right.
Well, I just go, okay, it's not going to work for this, when maybe another hair, and we can turn into a boss later, at some point.
Right. I think it's also
very few things are like, this can never work ever, right?
Yes. I think
that's
very important.
There's one thing I've been trying to design a hero. A lot of people know this. A hero that doesn't use a sight forever, and every time I try, I just hit a wall like immediately.
Right.
Of like, how do you make that work? And that, you might just keep hitting that wall, and that's okay as long as you know to when to pull back, right, and drive towards another wall.
Yeah, but I think that's very important. It's not to say that we don't give it up, right? We don't say that this will never happen ever again. But at the same time, I think Josh is trying to say that we don't set it aside, and then every time we make a new heroine go, is this the one? It's not like that, right?
Yeah, I have a running list of like 30 different UA cons for the future But like, yeah, when we make a new run, I don't try to slot all 30 UA concepts into their U box. I just go, what is this heroine's flavor? Do any of the UAs that I made make sense for that flavor? Yes or no?
Right.
And the answer is usually no, because UAs are very
character
flavor specific, right? And character. And so a lot of times we just end up, despite the 30 UAs we have backlogged, we just make a 31th UA
right.
that didn't even exist before.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of the thing, right? It's that trying to shoehorn that, and this is one thing that I've come to realize as I've started designing characters, because for context, I've only balanced characters a lot of the time, right? So designing characters is a relatively new thing to me. One thing I've realized is that trying to force creating a character just so that you can like flex your design muscles and go like, this character's gimmick is that they don't use a sight,
Yeah, they told me I couldn't use 5 sights, but I'm going to prove wrong.
Right. Or like in Battlecon or Xyz, you're like, what if this character doesn't strike? It's like trying to be cute like that, I think, is what creates those characters that end up being not good down the line.
Oh man, I still want a character that doesn't strike though. I know we talked about that the other day, but...
it's untenable, though. That's like ignoring half the game.
I know. I still want to see that line of text on a card sometime.
I mean, it might work.
You cannot use the strike action.
Right. So that means like they just have a bunch of like maybe one of their actions is that they just force the opponent to strike you. So you...
Right.
Or something like that. Like, I don't know. Anyway, the point is that, like, I'm not saying that we never make a character that can't strike, right?
Yeah.
It's just that I'm saying that you don't go into every character going like, this is the one, this is the non-strike one.
Right.
You keep
exactly.
you keep those designs in mind, and if they are relevant and they can work, then sure. Otherwise,
yeah, we're very much top-down designers at level. Yeah, and we rarely ever like design from the ground up.
And I think that's very important, because top-down design and ground-up design have their advantages, right? Top-down design's biggest advantage is that it's always more thematic. And all our games are about the theme more often than not. So trying to force a ground-up design is a bit sketchy. I've been guilty of ground-up design a lot because I hate how top-down design leads to stuff like Gaspar or Mariel, right? Like
Yeah, top-down design is very dangerous in that when you start with a flavor concept, I think most people, like in general, just tend to float towards the more complicated implementations because that's just
that's the easy way.
That's the intuitive way,
yeah,
right?
That's the easy way.
So, yeah.
And so I've been guilty of trying to actively avoid top-down design and creating characters from the ground up. So, I would go in going like, this character does X. What theme would fit that, right? When in reality, I should be going from what theme do I want to represent and what experience do I want to give, and then try to make mechanics that go down there. Because this is the harder path, because this is the path that tells you, you have to ignore some of the intuitive things that come into your mind. You have to say goodbye to the bad game design goblin. You have to...
start with lots of ideas is I think the secret.
Right.
When we design a bullet character, one of the things we do besides designing the character itself and the concept is we always define a character by the phrase X girl, where X is the thing that they do. And once we have that, it's always a thing we can fall back on, right? And when we make a girl or heroine for bullet, we can go, okay, a race car girl, what are all the race car mechanics we can do with bullet, right? How can we represent being in a race car in this game? And then we think of 3 or 4 or 5 different ways to do it. And then, immediately we can just zone on ones that are obviously going to be more ridiculous to implement or ones that are not quite as flavorful as we'd like.
Right.
Things like that. So
it's such a
start with lots of ideas, not just one.
Right. And then don't get too attached to any one idea. Learn the art of letting go. It's very, very important. You guys have talked a lot in various videos about future heroine concepts, but you haven't heard much about future boss mechanics yet. Any you can share.
Oh, we can talk about that, sure.
Sure. How about a boss that just has like an intensity that is so high that you will die? Period. How about that?
Yeah. There's let me just open up my document that you can't see on the webcam.
Right.
On my other screen.
No, but what if they see it in your irises, Josh, reflected?
They could, I guess. I'll be very quick with opening this document.
Counter character. I'm not sure if counter character confirmed means there's a character with counters that they tick up, or there's a character who counters things, right?
There is neither of those to my knowledge off the top of my head.
One of the characters we have might be considered a counter character because she can like one of her abilities is that she can like call out a bullet and then like if it would hit her, she just blocks it off.
Oh, her, yeah. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
But that's not like her core concept. That's just an action that she can do.
Right. But still, it's a thing, right? I guess you could say Rie is a counter character, right? She picks a color and then if she would be hit by it, she just sends it back. So I guess that counts.
Right? We're definitely trying to do more bosses that are like Senka, right? That create this experience, right? When you fight Bauk, they can tell like, oh crap, it's a sniper duel. That's cool.
Right.
Because the mechanics are weird and the art conveys it. So we're trying a little more of that immersion with boss fights. We have a boss character that like currently untested, of course, like literally throws you in jail and like removes you, the player, from the game.
Right.
Temporarily. And like, she's kind of like a policey type character. Or there's what else? We have a character way in the future that's like isn't even on the chopping block yet. That's her shields are in a roll to move board fashion, and when you break shields, you basically play like a roll to move game. But she's like way in the future. Yeah, she's basically a Snakes and Ladders heroine. Like
one of the other bosses we have is just straight up like you start without an action board or something, right? Like or something like that, or she eats your patterns or something like that.
That got changed a bit. She still eats things, but not that ridiculous.
Right. See, that's why we got things.
She used to eat. Yeah, she's a perfect heroine example actually. This conversation because this is a heroine that eats things. She can eat anything. In fact, like ever, forever.
Right.
And when we were designing boss, we're like, okay, well, what can she eat? What components can she literally just remove from the game without the game breaking? And we went a little nuts and went, well, yeah, she can just eat your action board, right? You can play without actions. You still have patterns.
Right.
She can eat your UA. Like you don't. Well, no, she can't eat your UA. You need a UA.
Yeah, you need a UA.
Some characters just shut down without a UA.
Right.
And when we made her, we kind of just went, well, why not just put all of them on her boss board? Why can't she just eat all of your stuff? And we quickly realized, like, before we even tested it, that wait, no, because if she eats this and then this, then the game gets really awkward.
Something you don't even get to play anymore, right? Like when she makes a certain combination
a little
of things.
much.
Right. So now I think all she does is actually just eat patterns.
Right? She eats all of your patterns. Like when you fight at the start of the game, she eats your entire pattern deck.
Right.
Completely.
And
how you get them back is by doing her boss patterns.
Right.
So, breaking her shield.
Counter character confirmed. Open to interpretation. I'll take either or. Well, there you go. I've explored some of that. Yes, I love Senka's boss fight design. Everything is cake to her. Look, if you cut something in with a knife, it's just cake. That's just really what happens. Meme.exe. But yes, there's a lot of really cool heroines. I'm particularly excited about the character who eats things.
That's your design.
For reasons I can't explain, but Josh explained some of it. It's
may or may not be a Filipino heroine.
Right. I'd love to see a boss who has super high amount of bullets to break each shield, but then clears your board when you break one. We kind of have like that's a
what do you guys want? What do you guys want to see? Because maybe kind of tease from like your ideas.
Right.
Maybe we've done them already.
So like maybe we've done them already, or maybe you just end up giving us an idea that we implemented in the game anyway, right? Like
oh sure, you're right.
Like this one's interesting. What if the bullet's shield breakpoint, the boss's shield breakpoints are super high, but when you break them, it bombs your board, so that you're safe. That would be really interesting.
Do we have a? I remember there used to be a boss. I think in like a way off expansion, but there used to be a boss who had one shield, and it was like breakpoint like 20 or 30 or something.
Right.
But the catch wasn't that, right? The catch was a little zanier than that. Maybe dexterity related. Yeah. But
yes, I remember what you're talking about.
Yeah, right. Her.
Her.
We do have some bosses that do kind of crazy things with shields. There's a boss that hides, like the boss fight isn't against her, it's like her pet, and she literally like runs away, and mechanically it's represented by you literally taking her shields and like putting them into the current or into the center.
Right.
And you have to like literally find her shields and break them by clearing them.
Yes.
So she's pretty zany. Again, untested so far.
Untested so far.
I think that'll work.
Hopefully that'll work. What else?
Yeah, there's a lot of it that we kind of cross our fingers. Go like, this sounds like it works on paper, and we really hope it works, because it would be a shame to like have to change this. You know, there's some where if we have to change it at all, it basically means going back to the drawing board.
Right.
They're like so weird.
But you shouldn't be afraid to do that, right? Like,
of course, yeah. That's the less of the day, right? Is you need to know when to back up.
Yeah, and I think one thing you need to realize, well, everybody needs to realize, is that when you design something, those things are not your babies. Those things are not your kids. You can throw them away. And, like, you know,
right.
Child care services won't come to your door and get mad at you, right?
Yeah.
Just throw them away if it doesn't work.
Not even throw them away. You just put them in the closet, right? You can always come back to them later.
Yeah, for sure.
With fresh eyes or something.
Either bosses or heroines that offer power-ups or cards that cover your UA board abilities with modifiers would be fun.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that.
So one thing...
It's one of those scary boogeyman things that just haven't wanted to approach yet. Like every once in a while, wake up and go like, yeah, there could be something.
Can I already interject about why this ability might not work?
Sure.
So this is another design thing that's really interesting that I really like exploring. So it's very similar to the Youngja thing. Characters' design should protect the player from themselves. Does that make sense? So it's cool if you would have another set of power-ups that essentially can replace your current actions, right? But what happens if you accidentally replace your default bullet movement action and then you lose? Because you can't form the patterns anymore.
You could technically play the game still, but yeah, it would be you'd be completely RNG at that point.
Right, and that's my point, right? I'm not saying it wouldn't literally work. I'm saying that it creates an opportunity for the player to essentially screw themselves, right?
Yeah, it would have to be something like the boss puts bad marker on your actions and you can remove them somehow. Like clear patterns gets rid of the markers on your actions.
Or if you use the action once, it goes away so that you can gain access to your other...
Yeah, you have to spend AP to get rid of it. Yeah, something like that, sure.
Right. A character with a single counter on the board, but bullets that land on it get destroyed. Bullets of the same number or color as the cleared bullet, perpendicular, also get cleared. That's just Mariel, though.
That's an interesting concept, though. Like, bosses haven't generated markers yet, ever. Like, can bosses generate markers? Does it cause the same problems as it does with heroines? Probably is the answer.
Unless it's like Senka. Then maybe not.
Unless it's like something where it doesn't interact.
Right. It has to be like a thing that doesn't interact. But Slim Kim, the thing you just listed is literally what Mariel does. It's not technically the same, but the gameplay experience is the same. You have a counter, things that are adjacent to or near the counter get cleared when you do that stuff.
Right.
Like, that's just Mariel. I just like the general concept of being given an actual reward for clearing shields, rather than just, you're closer to winning now. I think there's a heroine that kind of does something like you gain a reward for breaking a shield.
Yes,
Mariel
there are
does that.
A couple doing that in the future, too.
Yeah, but Mariel currently does that. Right? When you clear one of her shields, one of her patterns gets broken, and she gets easier.
Right.
So,
right, exactly.
Like, it's not an unheard of design space, but it's definitely something we can do more often. Maybe it's just me, but the boss modes seem like they could potentially have more design space than characters. Is it hard to flavor match mechanics from character into boss modes?
No, it's super easy.
It's super easy. It's just
usually,
Sorry.
like all of boss mode norm is like 60% time is just a weaponized version of the heroine UA.
Right.
Sometimes, like Senka, you can't do that, and so you have to design something else entirely. And those are actually the designs I like the most.
Right.
You're not kind of beholden to the UA. You can just go nuts and do whatever. But yeah, I think that it's easy to do, but it's hard to know when to do it, right? When is this heroine UA okay weaponize, and when is it not?
Right.
Does weaponizing it cause problems for other heroines?
I think the biggest problem that boss modes have is that and this is the thing. The reason why the design space seems so much bigger than heroines is because bosses, by their very nature, are characters that interact with other characters, right? Heroines, 9 times out of 10, do not actually interact with each other. They black box, right? So, like, for example, when you design, like, Rie...
Well, not yet.
Well, yeah. No, but 9 times out of 10, right? But, like, Rie, for example, doesn't care where the bullets are coming from. She doesn't care where she sends them. All she cares is that something gives her a bullet. She checks whether or not she bats it back. And then when she bats it back, it goes somewhere. Rie doesn't care anymore, right? So that's like black boxing, right? You only care about your input and your output. It doesn't matter what those are. Because
characters are very in a vacuum, right?
Right.
Which is why the design space can get so crazy. A heroine can do anything because their anything doesn't interfere with other people's games.
Right. So like, race car, like DDR heroine or whatever could play literal DDR/guitar hero or whatever, and wouldn't matter,
right?
Because at the end of the day, it's just she receives bullets from something, she does something with them, and then she outputs the bullets to another heroine, to the center, to the bag, whatever. Who cares?
Yeah.
Problem with bosses, and why bosses seem like they have way more design space, is because bosses interact with heroines, right? So bosses don't only have their components, they can technically design around other components. So that seems like, so much design space. But actually, it means less design space. Because like what Josh said, because bosses interact with other characters, you can't create a boss that breaks a character's mechanics. You can create a boss that gets dumpstered by a character. For example, like, how everybody says Bauk is significantly easier if you're just using Rie, because Rie can heal. But that's fine. The character still works, right? But you can't create...
Yeah, that's...
Sorry, yeah?
The game still works. That's the important... Right. We kind of... The important thing is we have to design heroines around in free-for-all mode. And that's also why bosses don't have difficulties, because matchups are so different depending on who you're using and who the boss is.
Right.
And whatnot. As long as the boss presents you with a puzzle to solve, like, it's fine if that puzzle's easier or harder.
And I think a big example of this entire bosses essentially are limited in their design space by the heroines that already exist. And this is a big thing, right?
Right.
It's that, for example, because Youngja's boss exists, because Mariel's boss exists, Youngja's boss couldn't work the way she's working right now. And we had a choice, right? We had a choice to either change the boss so that she would never interact with the Mariel token or Mariel marker, or change Mariel so that even if she got interacted with, the boss wouldn't break, right?
Right.
Well, in the end, we decided to change Mariel herself because what she does, basically, we expect in the future for a boss to be able to clear a bunch of bullets. More often than we consider a future wherein Mariel's token gets weirded out, right?
Right.
So we've realized that, we should just change
future-proofing.
Yeah, future-proofing. So that's the problem, right? Like if we create a boss and then, there's like 17, 19 heroines at this point, and then, we create a boss and then fail to realize that, hey, wait a minute, one of the heroines stops working against this boss, we're done. We're done so, right? There's no going back from that, especially if it goes to plan and we don't realize. So, why does it seem like we've left a lot of the boss mode design space on the cutting room floor, so to speak? is because if we make a mistake, it breaks the game like completely, and that's dangerous.
Yeah, you always have to fight a boss. You don't have to necessarily, but like not every boss is hard or easy for certain heroines, but you can still play the game.
Right, you can still play the game, right, and that's
it might not be as interesting experience as versus Bauk or something, but the game is like 15 minutes, so you just play another game with a different one or whatever.
Right.
And you go, oh, that was kind of funny.
Right. Haha memes.jpg, right?
Right. And
sorry, yeah?
Oh no, and then this kind of brings up another point too. We're looking into for the future of Bullet is that can heroines interact with other heroines? And the answer is kind of. The answer is not directly during your turn. Heroines can do things to you outside of the game, like at the beginning of the game or at the beginning of your turn before anyone does anything. Heroines can care about what you're doing, so to speak, but they can't do. So actually, we can talk about Yin. Let's talk about old Yin for a second. So Yin Newsgirl, who is the thumbnail for this
video.
Yeah, the thumbnail for this. Old Yin used to directly interact. She used to have actions that like let her use patterns on other heroines' boards and like clear their bullets for your own use and stuff.
Right.
And it technically worked, and it didn't break the game, but it caused problems that we didn't want to see, right? A Yin that could literally touch your board and interact with components caused timing issues, right? It essentially turned the game into Calvin Ball, where we had to provide an answer that a lot of people didn't like, right? What if Yin tries to use her pad me and I was about to clear those bullets and she was also about to clear bullets? What happens? And the answer we gave at the time during development was, well, it's just whoever gets there faster. And because she's a dexterity heroine at that point, right? And that's fine and good and all, it works, but we kind of figured that like a lot of people aren't going to be okay with that answer, right? It kind of turns the game into this zany area that, a lot of people would go, oh, I don't want to play with Yin. Some people would love that kind of air, but we thought that more often than not, people would just go, yeah, you can play whoever except for her.
Right.
Because she introduces this kind of design space that, literally is offensive, right? It literally, she can interact with other heroines in a way that causes these kind of problems and issues that players don't want to experience.
It's also untenable. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Like, I mean, right? Like she worked, right? You could just say whoever gets there first does it.
No. See, that's my point. Even that didn't work. That was why we scrapped it, right?
Yeah, it was just kind of a headache. We didn't create a bunch of FAQs for Yin. Like it was not worth it things, right? She was fun, it was flavorful, but at the end of the day, she got changed.
So my point is that,
and she still interacts. She still totally interacts, just in a different way.
Right. But like, for example,
messy.
But for the fans, and I just want to make this very clear, that Yin didn't actually work. It worked, but like Josh was trying to say, it Calvin balls the game. So what basically it means is that our answer to the question was to house rule who got to do the thing.
The answer is kind of figure it out.
Yeah, because Josh says whoever gets there faster. But nothing in the game codifies who gets there faster, right? What if both of you touch the bullet at like seemingly the same time, right? Like, how do you decide then, right?
I mean, there are dexterity games that do that, right? And like that's but like Bullet isn't a dexterity inherently, right? These are rules that we just don't want to get into.
Right. It's those dexterity games do have ways to resolve those things, but then we're at the point of juice versus the squeeze. We're creating a heroine that we essentially need an entirely new rule book for. Right?
Yeah, is she really worth writing, 10 FAQs, or is like she that fun? And the answer, that we came to was not really.
Not really.
Let's enter she now acts at the start of your turn. She does.
Right.
She does interacty things then.
Yeah, she does. Basically, she has a set of like news reports, and then they all do bad things to you, to other heroines at the start of every turn.
Yeah, she basically creates a passive effect that affects everyone, each round. and she chooses which one it is,
well, it's not
and she
always
can get
passive,
them back.
right? Like I think a large portion.
Oh no, they're instant now. They used to be passive, right?
But then we realized
they're now just pick a thing, do a bad thing, and then the bad thing ends. Right.
But we now realize that doing passives are also kind of sketchy. Again, because like you introduce this component that essentially fundamentally changes the rules of the game that we know for a fact nobody will remember exists, right? Like, you know.
And bosses do that too, but they do it constantly for the entire boss fight.
But also
Yin changed the rules every turn, like Flux, which is like
yeah, but
really
also
gross.
boss mode is a game mode wherein everybody knows for a fact that the boss permeates the entire game, right?
Yeah, hey, pay attention to the boss because that's this mode, right?
Right, but in free for all, it's the black boxing, right? She ruins that black boxing, so it makes it very difficult.
So it's really fun trying to figure out like how can we make interaction heroines that don't directly interact, right? You can do it like Yin, where she just does effects at the beginning turn where she can't offend anybody. You can do it like another character where she cares about what other people are doing, but in a way that she's still playing her own game and she doesn't actually touch other people's components or anything. I really hope that one works, by the way. Okay. I'm so scared about that heroine.
Cross fingers,
that it
dude.
Won't work.
Like sand fills up blank board spaces and you can clear them out. I don't know. Hourglass heroine. I didn't think.
Oh, there's a heroine that does that kind of.
Nice.
That like her board fills with like garbage. Essentially, yeah.
John says that I didn't think of boss modes like that. Makes sense. Have y'all designed the boss first, then the character? Most of the time, no, right? We design character into boss.
There is one boss that I have designed before we designed the heroine, and that was the boss that doesn't have a UA. And in that I wanted a boss that didn't have a UA eventually, and that happened.
So what happened was we designed. Actually, it's kind of like a weird thing, right? We designed boss without UA. We designed the heroine to match that, and then we were like, "Oh, this heroine doesn't work," so we made a new one. So, like, in effect, what happened was we created the heroine and the boss at the same time, but the heroine side didn't work, so we scrapped it, turned it into a new thing, and then, so technically this boss was made before the heroine was made, but, like...
Yeah.
That's splitting hairs, dude. Like, that's a difference of 2 weeks. Like, that's like splitting hairs.
Right. But yeah, usually it's heroine first and then boss second, because we have to make sure it works in free-for-all, right? Free-for-all is the, quote, main game mode.
Right.
And the boss mode is the variant. So if it works in heroine mode, it will likely work in boss. If it doesn't, that's when we know to do something else.
Right. 9 times out of 10, you want to create the heroine. Okay, like here's the thing. If you create the boss first and then try to make a heroine off of it, the problem becomes that things that work in boss mode as a boss aren't always translatable into being a heroine. But 9 times out of 10, being a heroine and then translating that into boss mode, 9 times out of 10 works, right?
Yeah, that 1 out of 10 is the, we have a boss with no UA. Right. Let's just give no UA to this heroine.
And I think that's a problem, right? Like, I really, really like it when we do the crazy designs where the boss acts nothing like their heroine side. But 9 times out of 10, it's actually the best to make the boss work like their heroine side. Because it's more thematic that way, right? You connect it more. And when we...
people get it, right? When they fight out, it's like, oh no, she does the thing she does in her hair form, but now it's bad, and that's scary.
Now it's bad
and that's
for
fun
me.
And creates an interesting puzzle.
Right.
And it's cool mechanically, too, because you can't fight the same heroine against their boss, right?
Right.
Adelheid can never fight Fugue in D minor because it's physically side of her board. And if she did, it wouldn't work because they both care about your bullets being face down.
So there are now 2 effects that are stacked on top of each other that say face down bullets are this. So which one takes precedence?
That work?
Right.
Yeah.
It's impossibility. But like that's kind of the point. And that's why whenever we create a boss whose boss mode is significantly different from their heroine mode, like Senka, for example, we try as much as possible to make that boss seem different from the heroine. Does that make sense? Right.
Yeah, well, and to make the flavor sense too, right? When I was Senka, I always knew our boss was going to be a sniper fight. I just didn't know what that meant yet. And when we got to the boss, it was immediately yes that her heroine UA is not going to work in her boss mode. She could put crosshairs in your sights and shoot you, but like I didn't even want to start thinking about that. So it's like, how do we make Gun Girl work in boss form? Well, of course she has to use her sniper rifle, of course, sniper fight, but like, how do we make that conveyed mechanically, right?
Or when you were talking about that one heroine who just straight up doesn't fight and has her pet fight, right?
Right, yeah.
Like that's just a clear example of us going, okay, this UA isn't translatable, so the boss is not actually this heroine.
Yeah, can the boss still be her? Not really, that wouldn't make any sense. So what else can it be? Right. Is there something else in her lore that we can make work?
Mariel does this a lot too, right? Like we went, okay, Mariel can't just be on your boards, right? That makes no sense, right?
Yeah, also Mariel's lazy as crap and wouldn't want to fight you
so
that
she just has a giant mech robot, right?
So yeah, she just throws a mech at you. And, you still see her in the art, she's still there. And the heroine that, doesn't fight you, the boss that doesn't fight you that we talked about, she's also in the art barely. So, you still know that it's her boss, but, there's just a twist to it.
A twist, yes.
Yeah.
Dance Dance Revolution character. Bullets can be made to drop to the bottom of your sight where it would slide to your damage. There's a bullet...
Yeah, you clear them in your hitbox, essentially, right?
Yeah, you would clear them only in your hitbox, right? And that's...
Yeah, when they get to your hitbox, you can clear them, some kind of thing like that.
Right.
That sounds hard. That sounds really fun, but it sounds like it'd be really hard to do.
I mean, it wouldn't be hard to do, right? You would give the character something along the lines of, like, she would be similar to Youngja, essentially, is how she works, right? Except instead of only pushing bullets one, the bullets will get pushed way bigger numbers.
Yeah, her UA would be like, if a bullet is placed into your hitbox, she clears it, right? So you're set up boards to where your bullets will fall right into your hitbox. Right.
Or, you to make it clear...
Maybe she might be the heroine that has a smaller sight. Oh my god. Chat person, you might have done it.
You might have done it. Like, to make it cleaner, maybe the bottom of her sight, or she just has a special bottom row of the sight where, like, if it lands here...
This is the clear zone.
Yeah, the clear zone or whatever, right? Who knows?
Who knows?
Right.
Yeah.
It would seem really frustrating to try and make someone stop and pay attention to you during a turn when you're already strapped for time. Exactly. That's why explicit interaction heroines are very difficult. And, we currently have one heroine design that isn't an explicit interaction heroine, but is on the verge of being one. And Josh and I are fighting about this character constantly. Josh really likes this character to exist. I want it to be deleted. And that's fine. Josh and I are still friends, hopefully.
Yeah, and like we really just need to test her eventually so we can stop arguing and see if it actually works.
Right.
It kind of introduces the same problems that Yin, where it kind of creates time issues, but not really. She's really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for people
and that's kind of our point of contention, right? Marco says that
it's weird and not. Josh doesn't think it's weird.
How do you track this? And my answer is like, you can track it. It's fine. If you miss out on your time window, it doesn't matter, right? You just missed timing window. She still can play Bullet herself. I mean, do you just want to talk about how she works? So we could.
Okay, sure. So basically the way this character works is that she can use patterns on opponents' boards, but her patterns don't necessarily clear things.
Yeah, her patterns don't clear. She's detective girl.
Right.
And her patterns are like crime patterns.
Clues.
Yeah,
right?
Clues that she's trying to get through.
Right, and she's trying to solve the mystery.
If she gets through all of her clues by using her pattern, she like alternate win con.
Right, so she's an alternate win con character whose win con is that she has to use every single one of her patterns once. Right? The gimmick is that she can use those patterns and find the requirements on other people's boards. She can also do it on her board, but like, the point is that she has no way of clearing bullets consistently. So, like, eventually her sight will get too full and she'll die. So she has to find the clues somewhere else, right?
Right. And so it does introduce this awkward time. Like, other players that are playing against Detective Girl have to play correctly. You can't just go, I move my bullet all the way down because I paid 4 AP. You have to go dot, 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 and then move it to that spot. And also, as Detective Girl, you have to look quickly, and it's kind of an honor system thing, right? Like the rest of Bullet, since it's kind of multiplayer. So right, Jane can see. Oh, I guess her name is Jane. Whoops.
Oh, I didn't do it.
Oh, no spoilers.
You did it.
Jane can see. It's just easier to call her that. Jane can see patterns on other people's boards. As they happen, you can be moving bullets quickly you want, and the other players just kind of have to, be okay with that, right? Just like I know that you're not cheating as Mary, because I'm not paying attention to your board. People against Jane kind of have to just go, yeah, I guess you saw that pattern somewhere, and that's the fun is when you play against Jane, at high level bullet play. When you play against Jane, you know what her patterns are, and you kind of have to play around them.
You have to hide the evidence, essentially, from Jane, right?
Yeah, you have to hide the evidence, exactly.
And there's a lot of coolness with this character, but, counterpoint over here is going like, what happens when I go, haha, I've found the thing, and they're like, no, I'm clearing the thing, and then,
Yeah, I mean, that's the big point of contention, right? Because it's just looking, like, how okay is it, right? The check is all in your mind, literally, right? I saw it, I use my pattern, it's over. They're in the middle of clear? Yeah, but I still saw it. Is that okay?
Right.
Is that okay? And I want it to be okay, and we'll see.
Somebody says,
okay
Doc McLeod says, couldn't you just check for clues between turns? But the clues are the patterns. You have to understand. If she can't use if she can't find more than one clue in a turn, she'll lose.
Her UA could say, like, you use your patterns at the end of the turn. Yeah, she has a detective step where she just checks during the end phase her patterns that she currently has, and that might be the lever actually that we pull if during the game. But then you have to ask questions like, well, what does Jane do during the option phase, right?
Right, that's the problem.
I guess she sets up her patterns, right, on her board, and she hopes that other. And that, honestly, that's kind of really ingenious, actually, if we have to pull that lever. Is that during your turn, you set up your own patterns, and the other players can see your patterns. They can look at your patterns because hands are face up in this game.
Right.
And go, oh crap, Jane has this pattern. I have to not make that pattern. Kind of like reverse boss.
No, she's just a boss, not a reverse boss. She's just a boss, right?
Well, no, in boss mode, you want to make those patterns, right?
No.
Against Jane,
but who's to say that you need to match the patterns on the bosses to get the benefit, right? Who's to say that matching the boss patterns is always a good thing, right?
Right, but let's write down that lever actually, so that we can pull it. But we're gonna try it with the real timiness first and see how it works.
I'm gonna get mad at you
eventually.
I'm gonna play Jane against you, and then protest every 5 minutes.
That's the thing, though. Like, there's no protesting. Right? When Jane uses a turn, you don't have to tell me. You just do it.
The reverse. Right? The reverse is when you clear a pattern. I'm gonna go. Oh, I wanted to. I've only.
Should have looked at my board faster. Right? Is that okay? Right? That's the question.
Yeah.
Is it a feel bad of oh darn, should have been looking at Josh's board and not Brad's board? Or is it a thing of nobody's ever going to be look at boards quick enough to clear patterns with Jane? We don't.
The all-seeing panopticon. By the way, that's the entire point of Jane. Right. By the way, is that she's supposed to make you feel like you're constantly watched, because that's the gimmick.
Yeah, right. She's the heroine that cares about other people's boards, not her own.
Right.
And she can still care about her own board, of course, but.
It sounds like you may want to have it so Jane is only looking at one player at a time, so it's not that. Okay, wait, stop right there before we finish this. Now we're just stacking mechanics on to prevent the one mechanic that's problematic from being problematic. Maybe we should just change the mechanic at that point, right? So I think the moment you get into that kind of design space, chat, you're veering off the cliff at that point. Like, just
slippery slope.
Yeah. You don't want to go there. Like, the moment you start adding exceptions, stuff, so that it works. It sounds to me that it just doesn't work and you needed a simpler UA, right?
Yeah. Wait a minute, I got it. Oh my god, I just realized.
What?
So Jane has that one action, that time stop action that I kind of put in as a failsafe so that Marco wouldn't argue with me.
Right.
Yeah, she literally Zawar was she has a 7 costs action that says everybody stops playing the game except for Jane for 5 seconds.
And I hate that.
And that's
too,
kind of a fail-safe of like, right. But that could also be the check step, right? Instead of checking at the end, she could just have an action that says everybody stops playing and now she checks. Like, she does a check step essentially during the game. That could work.
Maybe. But you also
That's
have to
something
understand that.
Maybe.
You also have to understand that when she does that check step. Okay, so why do I hate this time stop action? Because if it's like the last, say, 10 seconds of the game, if she time stops you, she can essentially force you to pull the rest of your bullets from your bag without having anything left. Not that that's a thing that usually happens, because most people finish a minute before 3 minutes ends, right? But you know, you get my point.
Yeah,
right?
does it interact weirdly with a timer, right? Of course.
Right.
And that's the other thing we have to consider too. The timer existing is kind of a thing that's always kind of lording heads, right? A lot of heroines we've designed work, but they take too long.
Right, and that's a problem.
And we always have to remember, like, is this a heroine that can reasonably be played in 3 minutes? And the answer is just no.
So,
and sometimes the answer is you have to be really good with her, but sure. And that's okay.
Right.
But the heroines that, like, nobody, like, you know, a genius could not play this character in 3 minutes and make it work, you know, then a step back.
So let's talk about the character that no longer exists because exactly of this, right? Can we do that? There used to be a character who basically is a stance switcher, right?
Depends on which one.
Not switching into boss mode.
Oh, them, yeah. But she who shall not be named.
Who has 3 unique abilities, and she swaps between them mid-turn, right? The problem was that the mere act of swapping the UAs technically means that you need to like get a component, put it aside, get another component, put it back in, and then do that.
You're spending a lot of time to manipulate components, right?
Right. You're just like constantly swapping components around, when in reality, the thing you should be swapping around is bullets. You know what I mean? Like, bullets are what the game should be, like the thing that you're tactilely moving around. Having to swap UA boards on top of swapping bullets just makes this character like you know, it functions, right? If without a timer.
Yeah, it's just not worth it, right? It takes time, and you're just manipulating a bunch of components for like not a lot of gain, really. It wasn't worth, you know, doing this constantly to clear a couple extra bullets or whatever.
Right,
and we made it work. You know, she still has 3 UAs.
Right,
they just work differently.
And rather, because the design space that we went for before was like, you know, oh, she's a stance switcher, so she needs to be able to switch stances often. So, but what happened was she would switch stance, and then literally 1 second later switch stance again. So it just kind of feels pointless.
Yeah, she had a star action that like switched stances. Right. So you'd like clear a bullet, stance switch, and then your stance switch would activate your U, which would clear another bullet, which would stance switching, and then it got really gross.
Yeah, and it could chain react, and the chain reacting was cool.
Yeah,
right. Let's be clear, the chain reacting.
Yeah, it's cool and fun.
Was cool, but it's
right.
It's just so much work to do something simple, and that's the thing, and that's something I want to also point out is that a lot of people tend to forget. Juice worth the squeeze isn't just a design thing. Juice worth the squeeze is also a gameplay thing, right? The amount of action
player experience, right?
Right. And you know, this tends to be a problem with stuff like BattleCon and Exceed more often than not, because they're the games that tend to rely on player execution more than the other games that we have, right? So, you know, there are characters in Exceed who jump through 17 hoops just to get power +3. And like, I'm starting to think that maybe that's not the way to go. you know, especially when other characters in the game can get the same bonus by just literally spending a gauge, right? Like, it's right? Like,
it just goes back to the like, how many ways can we design this concept, right?
Right. And sometimes it's not worth it to design the concept in that way because it just makes your players feel bad, right? Like,
yeah, like that character in particular, like you were having a lot of fun playing, and then when I played them, I just hated it. It was awful.
Oh, you're talking about the stance switcher.
Like, I didn't even... The stance switcher, yeah. I didn't even care. It was, like, clearing, like, 10 more bullets than an heroine. Like, it just wasn't fun. So, like, have to switch constantly, or worse, have to just remember what stance I'm in so I don't have to switch constantly.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
gross.
So Matthew's asking, did it only flip her left
yeah.
side? It only swapped out her UA side. Her actions were not touched.
Yeah, actually, her actions stay the same.
Actually, what happens now is that this heroine essentially just gains extra action. Anyway, they're not a stance switcher anymore. They're like an upgrade character. They level up.
They're a stance gainer. Yeah, they're like Magdalena.
Right. They level up and gain more abilities over the course of the game.
It's funny that you mentioned getting rid of action boards, though. But...
Ooh.
Because that's kind of a thing.
We could design a heroine with multiple action boards.
You can design a heroine with no action board.
I mean, we have.
Yeah, spoilers.
Yeah, that's fair.
We have done that. We should probably look at wrapping up soon.
5 minutes.
I got time for a couple questions.
Right.
5 minutes, yeah.
Yo, are you late? Yes, you are. Could instances be...
Just in time.
Allow you to rotate the pattern cards. One stance lets you play them horizontal, the other... Yeah, okay, but that's the thing, right?
It's funny that you mention a character that rotates patterns, huh?
Right,
I've never thought of that before.
But also, here's the problem. You still have to swap the UA boards. And that still takes time. Now you have now it's not just because the old UA boards were just, you swap into this, you clear a bullet. You swap out of this, you clear a bullet, right?
Yeah.
Like this one is even
that's
worse.
That's a great example, right? You know, if you want a heroine like Rose to rotate patterns, you could just have a that says you can rotate your patterns.
Right.
And that's it.
But this
you don't have to add the board swapping into it. You can just do it.
This proposed UA is just insanity, right? You swap your UA board, you take your pattern, you rotate it, and then you play your pattern, which might swap your UA board, causing you to rotate your pattern.
It's a lot of steps. It's a lot of steps for not a lot of gain, right?
Right.
And I think that's the other thing too. That's another really good example in that I think designers get scared of the other way too. We're scared of making something that's common, but we're also scared of making something that's really good, right? In that example, when I said, you could just have a heroine that can rotate patterns, I think a lot of people would go, but that's insane. Like, you can't just have a heroine that rotates patterns. That's like a fundamental game. It's like, you could. It's like, try it.
It's not a fundamental rule of the game. It's not. It's just not.
Right, but like a lot of people can think of it like that. That's mind blowing.
Right.
That like she can't just break all the rules. But she can't just play patterns. It's crazy town.
That's the best part.
But
right?
Maybe it's not.
But that's the point of making a character with variable character powers. Is that like this is a design concept that I think Exceed Chat gets though. Is that Exceed and BattleCon players get that every character should feel like they're cheating. Right? Every character should feel like they've broken the game somehow. Right? Like
Bullet's core design concept is that it's the shmup where everyone is a boss. That's kind of what I started from when I was designing Bullet. And that's why everyone has UAs, and that's why UAs are so like, game breaking. They change rules. Wait, what?
Because a lot of the characters in Toho are bosses, is what I'm saying.
Oh right, yeah, exactly. Like you want to do the cool thing. How do you think in shmups? You be a boss and you shoot a bunch of bullets, right?
Right.
You do the cool thing.
Yeah.
So in Bullet the game, you have a cool UA that basically breaks a rule, or lets you experience the game in a completely different way than somebody else. Like we said, Heart, it's a little tamer. It's a little less Crazy Town, but like we're really embracing that kind of concept in the future.
Right.
So look forward to future Bullet. Because it's coming eventually.
We'll see. Okay, I think that's it. I think that's all of the things we have to say. Just the logical extreme is to just rotate your site.
Yeah, right. I mean, why rotate your patterns when you can rotate your site, right?
I mean, the answer is
there was a heroine actually that her design concept was her site. Like you could place bullets from any direction. She was like a multi-directional hair. But that's one of those scary ones that I haven't really touched since then. It's like, what have I created? Kinds of things that like I have it in text form and I haven't done anything else with it yet. But we'll see. Maybe you'll see it sometime.
Right.
Maybe.
That sounds like complete insanity to me, actually.
Oh yeah, no, it's probably not going to work. That's why I haven't put it beyond text yet.
Right. We've also done like stuff like Scrabble Heroine, right? Wherein Like, what if your site just had stuff printed?
Oh, I want to do Scrabble Heroine so bad.
I want to do Scrabble Heroine,
but that's
too.
really hard. It's really hard. Yeah, what if your site had effects that procced somehow? You know, like you ended your turn on all the effects that proc, and maybe that's a bad. Or when you cover bullets, you get you clear bullets, and you get to see an effect after the clear. Maybe you get that, and it's a good thing. You know, it's one of those. It's like very big overhead. Is that I've kind of just we thought of, and we're like, let's think about that later.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
Like let's put that in the closet for now. It's not a child.
Yeah, let's keep thinking about it so that when we get to another set, we can think about it again. We've had time to think about it. But let's not go, okay, now we're putting it into testing. We have to think about it right now.
Right. Let's not go, all right, this next heroine is the one, right? Like, that's... Just don't. All right, so I think that's all the time we have for this episode of the Levelers Livecast. As, again, for the people who missed the start of the Livecast, we have changed the format. Big one, Brad is no longer the co-host because he has family. He's become a family man, as Guile has told him to. So Josh will be my new co-host. I love Josh. He's a cool guy. We talk a lot. We have good chemistry, so don't worry about it. Number 2, we're moving to a bi-weekly, fortnightly, every 2 weeks, whatever you want to call it, format. This is because we feel like the quality of the content has become essentially too normal, right? There's not enough news. There's not enough things to talk about.
There's less to talk about, right?
Because we're in that phase wherein every game is done being designed, every game is done being balanced, and now we're just waiting on shipping. So there's nothing really to talk about.
The long and short of it is that there's a lot of stuff at press, right? Oh, and the stuff that coming up is stuff that we really can't talk about right now.
Right.
And that I really want to talk to you about very, very badly.
Right.
But because of reasons, I can't. So
we can't talk about
it's kind of weird spot.
Bullet Sonic, right? Oops.
Whoa, yeah. Bullet Shrek.
Bullet Sonic, Bullet Shrek.
Yeah.
No, Bullet Shrek would be called Bullet Onion. You know that, right? The emoji would be the onion.
Yeah,
emoji.
the bullet naming is Bullet Unicode character.
Right.
So,
so
hope you guys like shapes.
Right. So it would be Bullet Ring for Bullet Sonic, and then Bullet Onion for Bullet Shrek.
Right, of course.
Right.
Right.
But yeah, so thank you everybody for watching. Oh my gosh, my hair is a mess now. I haven't been to a barber in 6 months, dude. It's crazy. All right,
just gotta comb it more. Just comb it constantly.
Comb it constantly, or just embrace the ahoge.
Right.
Become an anime. All right, thank you all so much for watching. As usual, it's been me, your host, Mark Dos Santos, also known as Mechaniker, and with me has been the ever wonderful, ever amazing project manager of Level 99 Games and designer of Bullet himself,
Josh Van, also known as A3. Thanks for coming by, guys. It was a lot of fun to talk about.
All right, see you guys next week?
Yeah. In 2 weeks.
Okay, so yeah, see you in 2 weeks. Don't forget to gain AP from clearing star bullets.
Design your characters better.
Don't forget to design your characters better. Thank you, World of Cycle 617. Thank you, and good night. Say happy gaming, Josh.
Happy gaming. I'm new here.